Well, welcome. Welcome anybody who's watching this, and welcome also tonight's guest, Richard. And I'm really delighted that you've agreed to join us for a conversation this month. And this is part of a series of calls that I'm doing on the subject of addiction, partly because it's an area very close to my heart, as you know, and also because there's the first Three Principles Conference on Addiction coming up in Minnesota next May. So that kind of spurred me to do something that would give voice to a number of different people who have experience in the field. Anyway, I know that you have decades of experience in the field, Richard, and we have known each other for really quite a long time now. So I'm delighted. I'm delighted that we've both discovered the three principles at some point in our recovery journey, and it's been really nice to reconnect with you. And I'm really looking forward to seeing where our conversation goes today. I'd also like to welcome other people who are joining us in the call, including Tony, and please just invite anybody who's on to feel free to ask questions at any point, or to come in and to share anything that seems relevant. But the main focus at this point, Richard, is on you, and it'd be lovely just for anyone who doesn't know you, just to hear something of your experience, your experience of what addiction was in your life, and probably more importantly recovery, and how the three principles has played a part in that. But however you want to
Sure.
I'm going to hand it over to you, Richard.
Thanks, Christian. Yeah, thanks for the invite. So yeah, I have had decades of experience, and not all of it good. Yeah, so just a quick thing. I did make one note, and then I just wanted to go sort of freestyle after that. But about this, I haven't given my surname on this. I see it's on the screen, and that's fine. It's just I'm not doing any anonymity thing, re-AA or any of that sort of carry on, but I am spending a bit of money at the moment in advertising some services I'm providing, and I don't want Google to get mixed up and direct people to this call where I'm
Sure.
trying to get some investment from them. Just by way of explanation why I'm just Richard instead of my surname in there as well, which is
you can, if I certainly won't publicise it, and you can take that off by managing participants if that.
No, it doesn't matter. Just for anybody who sees this and wonders why, and I'm certainly not representing. Although I have some positive experience of AA, I'm not here as an AA member or anything like that, and anonymity isn't really important to me.
Sure.
Unless I'm. Technology. Anyway, so a bit about my story. Your other two participants, Christian, I noticed that they didn't really talk at all about what they were addicted to and how their sort of progression to getting into recovery or to getting into the three principles went. But I'm going to do that just a little bit.
Please. No, and yeah, and it's it's really entirely what feels right to you, Richard. So I'm delighted.
Yeah, it is kind of my my story and my sort of the unique way I've come to discover the three principles through your good self mainly. But I did get into recovery. But my employers, the New Zealand Police, sent me to rehab when I was 22, and I, after a bit of reluctance and a bit of surely this isn't me, I did take to recovery. I did sort of see within myself that I was addicted to alcohol. That was my main thing, and from the day I arrived at that rehab centre, I didn't take a drink for 22 years. over 22 years.
Just because you've specifically said you're going to talk about that, what do you know, looking at it, and of course it's with the benefit of hindsight, what do you think the markers of addiction for you were? What were the things that your employers were noticing that were, you know, different from having a couple of drinks too many?
They had a really good HR program that was run by a recovering alcoholic who'd been through it all, and this person was tasked within the Wellington area where I was living to keep an eye on the staff and see what sort of problems they were having. And the drinking stuff that I had, I mean, it was a very drinking atmosphere, but in direct answer to your question, the markers for me were just a greed for more and more. And once I started, you know, it was pretty, 9 times out of 10, it was pretty impossible to predict the outcome. You know, so I'll just, you know, my thinking would be, I'll just go and have a couple here, and then I'll get home, or I'll go and do this thing or that thing, and it would end up in a massive bender. So yeah, they picked that out, and you know, I reluctantly agreed that you know, as a copper, a lot of the sad and horrible things that I got to deal with and see, and a lot of them were alcohol and drug affected, and I could see sort of the day-to-day customers, if you like, having the same sort of problems as me. You know, I went into a cell and saw a guy wake up and go, "What did I do?" And having no clue whatever after a blackout that, you know, he'd, you know, whatever it was he'd done. I think it was a car accident from memory. But if we'd told him, well, you sort of murdered 3 people and, you know, did all these horrible crimes, he would have had no knowledge. And that was certainly part of my story, waking up and not knowing what the hell I'd done.
Yeah.
Which was, you know, lots and lots of fear and and exasperation that I couldn't control that, and you know, everything else was pretty good in my life, I suppose.
This is
something I wanted to do.
It's a strange thing, isn't it, that the mystery of how some things can function well, and you know how it is baffling. It truly can be baffling. But you know, when you touch on that faulty, I heard this expression recently, the faulty off switch. I certainly identified with that for myself.
Yeah.
But even it wasn't consistently faulty. You know, sometimes I could have a couple of drinks and go home and.
Yes, yeah, and I could too. And you know, often kind of big formal things and black tie and all of that, I could just about get away with it, you know, most times, but sometimes not. Sometimes not.
Yeah.
And I have a family history, you know, fathers, grandfathers, grandfathers, uncles and aunts have really struggled with this. So it's kind of something I'm familiar with, something I've seen my mother and my grandmothers kind of roll their eyes and, oh God, he's at it again. And then I kind of saw it in myself as well. So yeah, that was it. And so I went to this rehab. It was really good. And then I went and did what they told me to, and I went to AA meetings and did all that stuff, and it was good. It was really good. And it took about 3 or 4 years, and then I decided to take my life in a different direction and got involved with counselling and working in rehabs, which I thought would be just a fine idea, and it was for a good time. I took some training and did some supervision and sort of college courses and things like that. And it went really well. I quite enjoyed it. and I was able to separate my personal life and my work life, and I had a good personal life, and my recovery, improved and got better over any measurable period of time. Certainly 5 years, 8 years, 10 years, 12 years. It got better in ups and downs. So I liked it, and I did the things that I was told to do. Somewhere, I eventually got married, and things were progressing in my life, and I thought, well, I better take another turn in what I'm going to do professionally, because counselling pays buttons. It's all very good and well if all you have to fund is one person's board and lodgings and money, etc. But when others came along, that was just not going to work. So I left, and that was it. Somewhere around 18 years without a drink, I made a semi-conscious effort, a semi-conscious decision not to go on and do recovery stuff for myself anymore.
And what behind that? What was your thinking at that time, Richard?
I don't really need this. I'm not like the others. I'm special and different. There was no real thinking. It was kind of a falling out of good habit, falling into I just won't bother, and that was fine for a while. But things did, with hindsight, the benefit of hindsight, things were heading in a downward trajectory. Slowly. They shouldn't have been, really, because I started a business and I was doing pretty well financially. Had two lovely girls, two young kids in the house at the time, and things like that. Was living not very far away from where you were during this period, and I never saw coming that I would pick up a drink again or get back into any of that behaviour. I thought I was kind of immune from it. I was past it, and there wasn't any conscious thinking, but I think there was some decrease in mental health, decrease in AA people, I suppose, would say, being spiritually well. I wasn't feeling grateful. I wasn't feeling, aren't I fortunate to have this life going on for me, and I became a bit of a miserable so-and-so, really. So it's, that was it. And out of, I just drank one day. That was it. I just went and bought some stuff, some alcohol, and drank it, and seemingly got away with it. And a few weeks later, I did it again, and things, got the way that happened back when I was in my 20s, and not addressing my addiction. And it was a really tough time. It came to a head. My wife sort of called me out on it, and that's right. That's it. Yes, I have been sort of cheating and sneaking this probably for a period of about 6 or 8 months, and I sort of made a resolve not to do it again. I didn't go back to what I'd done successfully before. I went and saw really expensive psychiatrists and psychologists, and the thing with seeing specialists of any kind, I suppose, is they're going to tell me they have the solution to my problem. The psychiatrist had a drug regime. And at that period, I believed that I had a chemical imbalance in my head, and this batch of prescriptions was going to fix it all. And it jolly well should have, with all the money I was paying. That was my thought. And yeah, we did that for a year or two, and I didn't. Well, probably about 18 months, and I didn't drink constantly. I did have a couple of lapses and everything. Maybe 3 or 4. I think 4 lapses, and it was just a miserable, drugged up, unable to sleep properly, piling on weight. It was a horrible time. It was a really horrible time. Eventually, I went back to AA and just got on with it. And slowly, things got better again. I got better. I kicked all the prescriptions and everything else, and just bumbled along. I was still looking. I was still a sort of a seeker. I hadn't become a I wouldn't say, boy, I'm glad I'm home and everything's perfect, and I'll just carry on this path for the rest of my days. It certainly wasn't like that at all. It was.
Sorry, I don't want to carry on.
No.
Well, I was interested because the title for this conversation is A Final Piece of the Puzzle. But when you say you were, even before we even get to that, perhaps, when you say that you were still a seeker, what was the sense of what was missing or what you were seeking at that time?
Okay, so I can see now I was misguided, and I was looking for a formula, for an equation.
Sorry, you were looking for what? I didn't catch that.
A formula. So I wanted somebody to say, so you have to go and, you have to do X activity plus, Y meditation plus, go and help some poor people, and then you'll get some peace of mind, and everything will be just fantastic. And I've always been that way. I, as a teenager, as a school kid, even in recovery, I kind of tried out training for marathons and martial arts and vegetarianism and yoga and whatever. I try it all and think, this will be the final piece of the puzzle. And it never was. Organized religion was another one. I was, I went and presented myself to the Catholic Church in West Australia and said, well, here I am, you can have me, and I'll come and work for you guys and be a priest or a brother or something. And they had me for about 3 weeks and said, well, actually, you're not really a Catholic. You're not really. You could be a Buddhist. You could be a Hindu. You're not what we're after. And I was seeking that sort of that sort of solution. That okay, I've completed the formula. The equation has worked out. I've done steps 1, 2, and 3, and therefore I'm bang on, and I don't have to worry about anything anymore. And yeah, that never worked. That's never worked. There isn't a formula or an equation or a that's it, done and dusted, you don't have to worry anymore situation. What I have found here though is this the sense that right, I'm now in the right on the right track, on the right road. This is where I'm supposed to be. And when you mentioned the final piece of the jigsaw, that's what I mean by that. Sort of, I think I have had insights throughout my life. Insightfully gave up smoking. I don't know, 25 years or something ago, and I just saw that this. Before I did that, I knew that it wasn't good for my health. It wasn't, there's all sorts of other implications, cost, and the health of children in the house and things. Didn't mean anything to me. I still wanted to continue, but then there was this insight, and I didn't smoke. And that was that I think is the turning point, really, is seeing things insightfully, seeing the three principles that you've introduced me to, and that lots of other people within the 3P community have shown me what to do with, and pointed me towards something that just seems sits well with me. It's it has been a real eye opener, but in a quiet way, in a sort of a light and peaceful kind of feeling way. When I compare the last 2 or 3 years to my first 2 or 3 years in AA, in recovery, it was kind of a loud, grating, uncomfortable, fight kind of feeling. Whereas just this last 2 or 3 years has been this kind of relaxed, quiet, peaceful, knowing kind of, we're heading in the right. I'm in the right roadway.
Yeah, lovely. There was something that struck me earlier when you were talking about at some stage, when you were either when you were sort of struggling with recovery or had picked up a drink, there wasn't a sense of nurturing gratitude. I don't think you use exactly those words, but it was something along those lines. But what occurred to me then about one of the things that has happened to me since I stumbled across the principles is that rather than gratitude being something that I've had to nurture, I find it just bubbling up at times. Yes. It's all of those things that I was seeking in recovery are now outcomes of kind of understanding the nature of life, that there are ebbs and flows in our thoughts and feelings, and that they don't matter very much. The ebbs and flows are whereas they used to matter a lot. And I was thinking today, in the early days of my recovery, people would talk about, oh, so and so is very sick. And what they meant was really just a sort of put down of people. Sick was used as a judgment, and anything other than total serenity was sickness. And just sort of, I mean, just talk about setting yourself and others up to win. And I find, when you describe that sort of gentle, I mean, it sounded almost like non-striving peacefulness, and that you were talking about in the last 2 or 3 years for you.
Yeah.
That striving's absent. You know, there's just much more of an acceptance of the ebb and flow.
Yeah, that's a good term. You know, absence of striving. And really, in my life at the moment, I mean, there is some turmoil. We have, as you know, family law situation with my daughter and granddaughter. We have business Brexit's just bloody awful for businesses at the moment.
Yeah.
I had a tooth abscess a couple of weeks ago. You know, if this had happened 4 or 5 years ago, if I'd been through this, you know, I would have been stressed. I wouldn't have been sleeping. It would have been discord throughout the people in my world, my kind of network and connections and family and friends and things like that. There hasn't been much. There's been a bit. There's been a bit of, you know, but I sleep, you know, and and I'm not thinking about any of these problems. I'm not obsessing on them, and they're not, you know, it's not something that I have to overcome. As you said, strive to put right. It's just happening. It's just, I think you introduced me to the weather metaphor. It's just, you know, cloudy weather, rainy weather at the moment, and you know, it'll go. So yeah.
And I mean, I know that you've always kind of worked with other people, and you know, whether formally or not, in that sort of sponsorship role. And I'm interested in, if someone is intrigued about, you know, what you're about and the three principles, or how do you explain that to people, or what do you share with them, and how does it fit with the more traditional approach to recovery, which I know has been part of your life for a long time too?
Well, I think it just does. I don't not talk about the principles when I'm with AA people, and I don't not talk about AA when I'm with 3P people. It just kind of blend in, and it's my personal take on things. You know, just as much as you know, I know people who have different religions or are vehemently atheist, or you know, that's their thing. That's fine. Just let them get on, and if it works for them, if it gets them through the night, it's great. I think if I met a person who was really struggling with addiction today, I would first take them to an AA meeting. If they were, you know, my kind of drinker, if they were addicted to alcohol, if they were kind of not suffering so much with physical addiction, well then perhaps it would be, you know, Starbucks and let's have a talk and see if things could veer toward pointing in the direction of the three principles. The thing I liked, the thing that there's a number of sort of metaphors or people sharing that have clicked with me, and you know, one of them, as I said, was your weather metaphor that I heard early on, and then that Sydney Banks thing about, you know, find the good feeling and go with that, and that works. And if I try and do anything, if I sit down with somebody and try and give them some time and listen to them and everything else, it's kind of that toward that good feeling. You know, find the good feeling and go with that.
Oh, nice. Yeah, it's funny when you were talking there. I was just thinking, a few months ago, a friend of a friend was put in touch with me, and had really kind of his life had sort of massively unraveled, to be honest, and the mutual friend knew that I was in recovery and asked if I'd speak to him. But it was really, I suppose, two things occur to me. One is that it was obvious in this case that he really needed that 24/7 support that is available through AA. I mean, obviously meetings aren't on 24/7, but that access to telephone contact and coffees and chats and all of that thing. And unfortunately, in fact, he'd already made contact, or was in the process of making contact with them when we first got together. And the other thing that just occurred to me just now, the realization I had just now, is that wisdom is available to, in each moment, in each conversation. It isn't that there's necessarily a formula in what you might suggest or point someone else to, that that in each moment there's clarity, there's the higher power is available, and that's nice. That's reassuring.
Yes, it is. Yeah, definitely.
And I have to say, this person, who really was quite disturbed, quite chaotic, really, to put it mildly, it has been lovely to see him just sort of settle down in a way that I utterly know that a few conversations with me and a few webinars probably wouldn't have done for him. It's just, but it's been lovely to see that, again, the confirmation that without any denial of how catastrophic addiction can be, there's an essence that's unbroken, which can flourish again.
Yes.
An opportunity.
Yeah, definitely. And it would be nice if maybe in 10 years there'll be places in the UK like Gulfstream Recovery Centre, Gulf Breeze. Yeah, that looks wonderful. And if I met somebody who had the money and the means, that would be the place, I suppose. But, wisdom in the moment, and even working with people, talking to people, just being with people. Often the wisdom that's transferred in that interaction is to me. This person who's struggling with an active or recently active substance situation gives me some wisdom. It gives me some real insight into what I'm doing. I don't want to muck around with what I do. It's fatal. I've seen people die from this. When I got back for my second bite at the cherry, 5 or 6 people in a similar situation, trying to come back after a good long period sober, and 4 of them are dead now. So that's just Edinburgh recovery that I was involved with. So not. And I'm not saying that to it's not an exaggeration or a reason for what I do. It's just a reality. It is a big deal.
Yeah. I can remember when I first got sober, people saying to me, if you've got this condition and you don't get sober, it's deaths, jails, and institutions. And I was thinking, oh, come on, that's a bit dramatic. And at the time I got sober, as you know, I was a lawyer, and I was in practice, and I drank. I was a court lawyer, and I drank with a lot of other court lawyers, and I was just naive in that skepticism, because 10 years on, something like half of that group were dead. But I mean, despite their their brains and their money and everything else. It was, you know, it's and while I absolutely know that there is a part of us that remains unbroken, that there is this essence, and that true self can't be destroyed. I am also very conscious of its the addiction is a very tricky beast. It's
yeah, it is. It's there was a television series recently called Catastrophe. Did you ever see that?
The comedy, yeah.
It was a comedy, but the main character was an American who came over and met an Irish woman in London.
Yeah, it's very funny.
He was in recovery, and he went back to it all, and got out of it again. And that was the point that you were making about being unbroken and being a whole, complete human underneath active addiction is that's what got me with that program. That's what sort of was my takeaway from seeing that sort of dramatic thing, despite it all, despite being, you know, sneaking off to the basement and sipping and taking miniatures of vodka or whatever it was. He was still, you know, a dad and a partner and a this and a that, and he eventually, well, I think he eventually saw it insightfully and decided to stop drinking.
I don't think I've got to that bit. I think he's still on. I'm watching on.
Spoiler. Yeah.
Spoiler.
Yeah.
I was thinking, Richard, I don't know if you remember, but many years ago, it's back to that sort of good feeling and the unbroken essence. But many years ago, you organised a retreat, and the retreat leader was in fact a priest. But he was a lovely man. He was very, very warm and gentle. I'm afraid I can't remember his name. And in one session, I can't remember what he was talking about, because I was very into the sort of steps and getting it done, and he was much more kind of gentle and, you know, about creating that warmth and acceptance. And he said something in one of the sessions about it doesn't matter what you think about the higher power, whether you've got belief or you know, what you think it is, but just know this, that God loves you and God wants you and God needs you exactly as you are right now. And I remember that, you know, I get goosebumps just thinking about it. It just sort of hit me, because I didn't really have a concept of God that I, you know, trusted or believed in or could rely on. But I felt something very deep with it. You know, it really touched me then. I don't know if you have any memory of that, or if you were in
I do. Yeah, I do. Yeah.
But it's that
I remember where it was.
It was in the Borders. It was near Dumfries.
Yes.
And
yes.
It was, but it's there's something about that. It doesn't matter about the language to me today. You know, that what he was, I think what he was tuning into and transmitting was that the essential connection that as we connect with our own true self or inner essence or whatever you want to call it, it is also part of that enables us to connect, you know, just effortlessly with other people.
Yeah, I used to get that. I don't know, probably around the same time. Rabbi Lionel Blue used to do a sort of pause for thought on Radio 4, and he hit me like that a couple of times. You know, within a year, he'd come on and speak stuff that didn't resonate with me at all. But yeah, a couple of times he did, and it was just as you described. He was plugged in to something, and he was able to transmit that to me, which is a wonderful thing. Yeah.
Lovely.
And I don't spend any time at all around priests or much organised religion these days. Weddings, marriages, and funerals, I suppose. But I do still need that need. I have that need that. And that's part of the final piece of the jigsaw, is just feeling a part of things. I only recently heard it described by an old 3P'er as well. It's us being part of the divine mind, and that just works for me. It's spot on with any other kind of. It's not theology, is it? It's human need for contact with something, whatever it is. And I know atheists that have got it too.
Somehow the word spiritual doesn't quite do it justice. Just as that sort of no. For me anyway, in my thinking, association with crystals or something, and I mean, not there's anything wrong with crystals, but it's not what we're talking about here.
No. My kind of education and background and family, that it was all, your job is to go and convince people of the wrongness of their thinking and the rightness of our thinking. My father had this saying, he's on the wrong track. He's just got it completely wrong. And he'd be saying that about, he was a Catholic, and he'd be saying that about Hindus or Muslims or Jews or, kind of higher power people. Yeah. They were all on the wrong track. He had to do it his way. And that's, I'm glad that's all in the past.
It's a lovely thing to know that absolutely everybody in your life, the people that you love and are close to, and the friends, and even just casual encounters, every single one of them has everything they need already, whether or not they know it. I find that a wonderfully encouraging realization.
Yes, absolutely. It's just something to be at peace with. Finally, it's a being with the rest of the inhabitants of the world, and everything's as it's meant to be. It doesn't need me to busily change it, persuade it to do anything else, but just be and be a part of it. And
Richard, are you up for questions, if there are any? I see Tony's there. Tony often has questions. I know Lynn is sort of multitasking as she listens to this. But Tony, are you? I don't know. I can't. Your camera's off, so I'm not. Oh, he's there. Any questions?
Yeah. Not really so much questions. It's really nice listening to you both. Thank you. I can relate very much with what you're saying. I've spent many years. I haven't had 22 years of continuous abstinence in AA, but I've had 26 years of experience of being in and out of AA, and I've certainly related to the seeking, which for me started really as a part of being in AA. That seeking started. I just think it's for me I'm sober now. I'm not going to AA. A very, very close friend of mine is going to AA, and we speak on a daily basis, and we kind of compare notes as to how we're both getting on. Me not doing AA and him doing AA. And in a way, it's I know it's not funny, but there is a kind of sense of amusement in it, in that we're both trying to challenge each other as to, well, how come we're both staying sober? Because I'm not in AA. doing everything that he's doing. You know, he's putting his chairs out, he's writing his gratitude list, he's reading his newcomers, and he's doing all these things his sponsors asking him to do, and he's writing his resentments out, and he's doing his step tens. And for him, he feels that's maintaining his sobriety. And I'm actually finding not doing all those things, it's a lot easier to stay sober. And one of the things you said, which I think for me is a little bit challenging, but I also don't have the answer to it myself, as you mentioned. And I think I'd probably do the same thing if somebody was an alcoholic that you said you were, and I was the same kind of alcoholic as well. Where would I take them? Would I take them to an AA meeting? That's it's not something, thank God, I have to deal with today. But I don't know if I would, because for me, you know, when people are at their most vulnerable, that's when they're most receptive to being, you know, influenced by whatever the message is. You know, that could be Scientology, it could be the Jehovah's Witnesses, it could be, as you did, going to a Catholic church. And, you know, I've certainly been to some really good meetings, and I've been to some really bad meetings, and I'm sure you have too. And I've had some great sponsors, and I've had some bloody awful sponsors. And I think one of the shames of AA, I know it would never work that way because it's not the way it's set up through the traditions, but, you know, people can be very vulnerable, and if you get under the wrong wings, I've known people come off of medications because their sponsors have told them to, and, you know, lots of different things where it's not worked for people. I've known people that sadly have, you know, committed suicide, and as many of them as I've known that have relapsed in AA, the ones that have relapsed through the pressure that they found within it. And I've also brought that same obsessive thinking into the three principles. You know, I needed to, obviously no one did it to me, it's just me, you know, I needed to find out, well, what's the right way to do the three principles? Is it to listen to that person, that person, that person? I've always been looking for, as you said, you know, a formula. But that formula for me was always very black and white. It was a very all or nothing. It was, I need to find the right way of doing the three principles. You know, that, as Christian knows from a conversation the other week, that in itself presents its own problems. So, you know, I'm just grateful that today that there's people like you that are sharing, you know, your experience and where you're at now, and, you know, to be part of the conversation. You know, I've always wanted all the answers, but I haven't been able to find them. You know, I've read all the books. I think the irony of something that kind of did affect me recently was I listened to a talk. There was a talk recently that Sydney Banks' son had done. It was an interview with him, and he said that, and he was asked in it, you know, out of all of the teachers of the three principles that you're currently aware of, who do you feel at the moment is best speaking in a way that your father, I'm not quoting him, but it was along the lines of, if your father was alive now, who would he be? You know, that guy's on the money. And the person that he said was Eckhart Tolle. And that kind of amused me in a way, because I kind of listened to him many, many years ago. And, you know, I thought he was going to say, I don't know, like Keith Blevins or Jules Pransky, or all of these other people I love listening to. But he actually said someone that wasn't really in that community. So, yeah, just appreciate joining in today. Glad you're doing well. I think, like you, I've got stuff going on, recent breakup with my partner and a lot of stuff. And I'm hopeful that my skin is getting a bit thicker now. I don't know if it was something that was part of your makeup, but one of the things I related to a lot in AA was being extremely sensitive to the way I react to life and react to situations. So I'm certainly in a much better place now. And whereas I would normally want to be able to put my finger on exactly what it is that's making me feel better, today I'm just quite happy just to not know. So that's new for me. So that's my contribution. Thank you.
Thanks, Tony. Thank you.
Thanks, Christian.
Thank you. Oh, sorry, just do you know what occurred to me there when you were speaking, Tony, was that thing that after the Modelo project, and you know, quite a number of people which was a housing project with lots of problems that was kind of turned around by an introduction of an understanding to principles. And one of the things that really struck me when I first heard about that was the extent to which lots of the people had addiction problems, but they kind of knew for themselves what the right thing for them was. So some went to rehab, some went to AA, some did, joined churches, some just stopped. But most of them changed their lives, and but in their way, and that, there's something very encouraging about that.
Yeah, thanks, Tony, and thanks, Christian. Yeah.
Oh, sorry.
I was just going to say as well, if you don't mind, is on Judith Sedgman's website, she's written a lot of essays, and there's an essay that she's written on there, which is a letter to Bill W. Which I don't know if you've seen it, Richard, but it's definitely worth. Yeah, it's definitely worth a read. And I think that it's because I definitely agree. I think that for me, potentially the strongest thing about AA is the fellowship, that availability of people that are on the end of the phone. When everyone else, sadly with alcoholism, as you know yourself, when everyone else hates you, when everyone else has abandoned you, when everyone else is not picking the phone up, the hand of AA is always there, isn't it? Hopefully. So, there's nothing out there at the moment that can offer that kind of potential support. And I think until there is, it will probably still be the go-to.
Thanks, Tony. I'm just going to mute you because I think there's some there's some background noise. Richard, I noticed we're coming up on our time, so I'd like to just hand it back to you. I don't know if there are any observations from the call or Tony's comments or anything else that you'd like to say by way of wrapping up.
Thanks for the opportunity, and thanks, Tony, for what you had to say. It was great to hear from you, and I think it's whatever gets you through the night, whatever works for you, great. And it's not for me to tell you or anybody else to tell you. And I've been to some dreadful AA, and I've also been involved in some 3P, calls that some weren't as great as the others, and some were, not so good. But I think it's for me, I feel that I know that this is the right pathway for me to be on, and I feel I'm not a black belt in this whole 3 principles things. I've got no intention of making it, of becoming a professional within it. I don't want to earn any money from it. What I do want to do is just continue turning up and being opened up to more and more insight into these 3 principles, because it's turned things around 180 degrees so far, and I'm just ready for some new learning. It's been great. It's good to be a beginner. It's good to be an early student. I'm enjoying that.
Oh, lovely. Thank you. Well, that sounds like a really nice place just to call a halt to. So thank you very much. Call a halt to this call, not your journey. So thank you again, Richard. I really appreciate you making the time, especially when you're away traveling. And thanks so much. Glad that we're doing this. We're on this journey together.